The sun was barely above the horizon, and I was already at the stove. Every morning at my son's house started the same way. I woke up at 5:30 to make breakfast for the family. Lloyd liked scrambled eggs and bacon, his wife Tanita liked oatmeal with berries, and the kids liked pancakes with maple syrup. 4 different breakfasts, and everything had to be ready by 7:30. Scrambled eggs sizzled in the pan, filling the kitchen with a familiar aroma. In the 12 years since Archibald's death, I'd gotten used to this routine. At first, it had seemed like a temporary solution, to live with my son until I got over my grief. But the temporary had become permanent, and now this house in McAllen was my cage. Grandma, where's my backpack? My grandson Toby, an 8-year-old hurricane of energy, burst into the kitchen. Right where you left it yesterday, honey. In the hallway on the hook. It's not there! Toby stomped his foot, pouting his lips in frustration. I sighed, flipped the bacon, and went to look for my backpack, which, of course, was under Toby's bed. On my way back to the kitchen, I heard the scrambled eggs sizzling and burning. I had to start again. At 7:15, Tanita came down to the kitchen, impeccably dressed in a cream-colored business suit. Her dark hair was in a perfect bun, and her face was already wearing flawless makeup. Eudora, I told you to get my papers ready for the meeting. She didn't even say hello. Where are they? I put them in your briefcase last night, I said, pouring coffee into cups. Tanita pressed her lips together and sat silently at the table. Her coldness had long since stopped hurting me. When I'd moved in 12 years ago after Archibald died, she'd tried to be friendly, but she'd quickly realized she could use me as a free housekeeper and nanny. Since then, our relationship had been reduced to formal socializing. At 7:25, Lloyd, a tall man with thinning hair and a budding paunch, came down to the kitchen. My son, once a sweet boy with dimples on his cheeks, was now a stern manager at a construction company. Mom, you've oversalted the scrambled eggs again, were his first words. No good morning, no thank you. Sorry, Lloyd, I replied automatically, even though I knew there was plenty of salt. He snorted and went back to eating, staring at his phone. Tanita was silently nibbling on her oatmeal, glancing at her watch occasionally. By the way, Flora's coming over tonight, Lloyd said, keeping his eyes on the screen. She had something important to discuss. My heart twitched a little. Flora, my youngest, rarely came over, usually only when she needed something. I wondered what it was this time. Great, I tried to smile. I'll make her favorite blueberry pie. Don't bother, Tanita cut me off. We'll have guests from the office. We'll order dinner from the restaurant. But I said don't, said Tanita. You'd better clean the guest room. It's dusty. The day went on as usual. Laundry, ironing, cleaning, preparing lunch for the grandchildren who would be home from school. Toby and his sister Lizzie, a 6-year-old girl with curly hair and a stubborn temper, often tested my patience. But they were the only people in the house who occasionally hugged me. Lately, though, even they had begun to copy their parents' behavior. By late afternoon, I felt squeezed like a lemon. My back was aching and my arthritic knees protested every movement. But I continued to prepare for the guests. I dusted all the corners of the living room, arranged the candles Tanita had brought from her last business trip, and organized the guest room. At 6:30, the doorbell rang. Flora hadn't bothered to call to warn me of her arrival. I hurried to open it, trying to ignore the pain in my knees. On the threshold stood my daughter, a slender woman with a short haircut and facial features reminiscent of Archibald. She was wearing an expensive dress and holding a small purse from a famous designer. Mom, she pecked my cheek, leaving a trail of lipstick. Have you lost weight again? You don't look so good. It was her way of saying hello. I'm used to it. Come on in, honey. Lloyd and Tanita will be here soon. Flora walked into the living room and sat down on the couch, putting her leg over her foot. She worked as a receptionist at a dental clinic and was always complaining about the hard work, even though her duties were mostly answering phones and taking notes. How are you doing? I asked, taking a seat next to her. Oh, don't ask. She rolled her eyes. Work is a madhouse. Dwight's behind on child support again, and Pearl's having trouble at school. Pearl was her 13-year-old daughter from her first marriage. After divorcing Dwight, Flora married Ernest, an accountant, with whom she lived for 5 years and then divorced him as well. What happened to Pearl? I asked worriedly. Nothing much, just sassing the teachers. Just like you, just as stubborn. I didn't remember ever sassing teachers, but I decided not to say anything. There was no use arguing with Flora. The front door slammed and Lloyd and Tanita walked in. They were followed by two men and a woman in business suits, colleagues from the office. Flora! Lloyd put his arm around his sister. It's been a long time. Too long, she smiled. Hi, Tanita. They exchanged cool kisses in the air. Flora and Tanita had never gotten along. Mom, get us some drinks, Lloyd ordered, and organize some snacks. I hurried into the kitchen, glad that I'd prepared the cheese and grape canapes ahead of time. While I was arranging them on a plate, Flora came into the kitchen. I need to talk to you, she said, closing the door. Alone. Of course, darling. Is something wrong? Flora looked nervously back at the door and lowered her voice. Mommy, I'm having money problems. Ernest is behind on his payments and I need to pay for Pearl's courses and car repairs. I sighed again. Flora, you know I only have a pension, and I give most of it to Lloyd for living expenses. But you must have savings, she almost hissed. Daddy must have left something, right? Your father left the insurance policy I split between the two of you 10 years ago, I reminded her. And my savings. It's almost gone. God, Mom. Flora splashed her hands. You always say that. Can't you help your own daughter for once? At her raised voice, Lloyd came into the kitchen. What's going on in here? Flora turned to him. Can you believe it? Mom is refusing to help me with the money again. Lloyd looked at me, and I saw in his eyes the same expression that Archibald had when he was displeased, a mixture of disappointment and contempt. Mom, we have to talk. His tone didn't bode well. But not now. We have guests. He took the tray of canapes and went out. Flora gave me another disgruntled look and followed him out. All evening I could feel the tension building. I served drinks, changed plates, smiled at my guests, but inside me, a restlessness was growing. Something was cooking, and that something concerned me. When the guests left, Lloyd, Tanita, and Flora sat down in the living room. Lloyd gestured to the chair across from me. Sit down, Mom. We need to talk. I slowly lowered myself into the chair, feeling my heart pounding. What's the matter? Mom, Flora and I have been discussing your situation, Lloyd began, interlocking his fingers. You're 65 years old now. You've lived in my house for 12 years and… So? I felt my back grow cold. And you don't do anything for your family, Flora intervened. Not financially, not morally. What? I couldn't believe my ears. I cook, I clean, I babysit, I do the laundry. That's the minimum you can do for free room and board, Tanita cut me off. But you refuse to help Flora when she needs money. You refuse to take on more responsibilities around the house. What chores? I felt a lump in my throat. I'm doing the best I can. I have arthritis, my back… Exactly, Lloyd interrupted. You're becoming a liability. We thought you'd be able to help with the kids, with the house, but you're complaining more and more about your health. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. All these years, I was the first one up and the last one to go to bed. I cooked, cleaned, raised their kids while they built their careers. And now they call me a burden? I've given you everything. My voice shook. My whole life. I worked as a school cook so you could get an education. I gave up everything for you. Oh, here we go. Flora rolled her eyes. Now she's going to tell us how hard it was for her and how grateful we should be. But it's true. I felt tears running down my cheeks. I never asked for anything for myself. Even when your father died, I didn't burden you with my grief. You moved into my house and lived off me for 12 years, Lloyd said coldly. And now you refuse to help Flora. You know, Mom, she and I had a long talk and we decided you'd be better off on your own. What? I thought I'd misheard. You heard me, Flora looked past me. You need to find another place to live. We'll help you look, but you can't live here anymore. You're, kicking me out? I couldn't believe my ears. We're offering you an independent life, Tanita said diplomatically. You can rent a small apartment on your pension. But I'm giving you almost my entire pension, I objected. I have almost nothing left. It's your choice, Lloyd shrugged. You could have saved, but you chose to give the money to us. Now you'll have to manage on your own. I looked at my children, trying to find some sympathy in their eyes, But all I saw was coldness and irritation. When did they become so callous? What had I done wrong in raising them? My children, I began, but Flora interrupted me abruptly. Mom, stop being so dramatic. We're not kicking you out on the street. You have a week to find a place to live. I can even lend you some money for the first time. Lend! I grinned bitterly. You want to lend me money after all I've done for you? What have you done for us that's so special? Lloyd suddenly exploded. You were just a regular mom. You did what you were supposed to do. You don't need to turn normal parenthood into some kind of feat. His words hit me like a slap in the face. A normal mother? I remembered the sleepless nights at the bedsides with sick children, the 2 jobs to pay for Lloyd's college, Flora's tears after her first heartbreak that I wiped away with my own hands. You know what? I rose slowly from my chair, feeling my legs shaking. You're right. I really should leave. I'll pack my things. Mom, don't be so dramatic. Flora clearly didn't expect such a reaction. We're just saying that you need to find your own place. I understand. My voice sounded strangely calm. I'll leave. Tomorrow. But Mom, Lloyd started, but I interrupted him. No, you're right. I'm a burden on your house. I have to go. I headed for the stairs, feeling their eyes on me. Something inside me broke, but along with the pain came a strange relief. Maybe this was for the best. Maybe it was time to start living for myself before it was too late. As I walked up the stairs to my small room, I thought about what lay ahead. Fear was mixed with some wild, inexplicable sense of freedom. I didn't know where I would go tomorrow, but I knew one thing for sure. There was no turning back. The morning was gray and dank, as if the sky itself were mourning my fate. I woke up before dawn, though I hadn't slept much the night before. My thoughts swirled in my head like autumn leaves in the wind. Where to go, what to do, how to live on. 65 years old, arthritis, a meager pension, almost no savings, not a good start for a new life. I packed quietly, trying not to make any noise. The house was still asleep. Tanita and Lloyd were usually up at 7, the kids at 8:30. I had about an hour to pack and leave without making a scene. I didn't want to see their faces, didn't want to hear fake consolations or, worse, annoyed sighs. My closet fit into one old suitcase. A few dresses, 2 pairs of pants, blouses, underwear, a warm sweater, and a jacket. I added a photo album, a jewelry box with a few pieces of jewelry, and a small porcelain ballerina, Archibald's gift for our first wedding anniversary. Everything else, books, dishes, an old sewing machine, stayed at my son's house. Maybe someday I'll come back for them. Maybe I won't. I left a note in the kitchen. I'm leaving now. I don't want to bother anyone. I'll call you when I'm settled. Mom. Short and dry, like our relationship over the last few years. I quietly closed the door behind me and walked outside. The city was still just waking up. Rare cars drove down the street, lights already on in some of the windows. I stopped for a moment, looking at Lloyd's house, a 2-story ranch-style building with a neatly trimmed lawn and flower pots on the porch. For 12 years I'd considered it my home, but it had never been mine. I always remained a guest there, tolerated out of necessity, and expected to be grateful for every piece of bread. The suitcase was heavier than I thought it would be. The arthritis in my knees was making itself felt, and every step was painful. But I walked on without looking back. Something inside me, a hardness I'd never known before, wouldn't let me give up and go back. The neighborhood where Lloyd lived was one of the best in McAllen. Neat houses with well-maintained yards, new cars in the driveways, kids' bikes neatly stacked in the garages. The farther I got away from it, the more modest the houses became, the fewer flowers in the front gardens. After a 20-minute walk, I came to the main street and stopped at the bus stop. I didn't have to wait long. The old bus opened its doors with a hiss, and I struggled to get my suitcase inside. "Where are we going, ma'am?" asked the driver, an older man with a gray mustache. I hesitated. "Where to? I didn't have a definite plan." "To the terminus, please." "Uptown," he nodded. $1.50. I handed him $2 and walked into the half-empty saloon. I sat by the window and watched the houses, the stores, the schools. The familiar and unfamiliar places of the city I'd lived in for the past 12 years float by. My thoughts went back to last night. You're a burden to our home. Those words spoken by my own children kept echoing in my head. How could they? After all I had done for them. I closed my eyes and the memories came over me like the waves of a tide. The year was 1980. I had just married Archibald Macy, a young engineer with brilliant prospects. We were so happy in our little apartment in Austin. He worked for an engineering firm, I was a secretary for an insurance company. We dreamed of a big house, of children, of traveling. The world seemed full of possibilities. A year later, Lloyd was born, a big, healthy boy with a loud voice and his father's blue eyes. I quit my job to take care of him. We're a little tight on funds, but happy. Archibald would come home from work and spend hours playing with his son, building castles for him out of pillows and blankets. Another 4 years later, Flora appeared, a fragile girl with a mop of red hair and a scattering of freckles on her nose. I remember Lloyd, then 5, looking at his little sister with curiosity and asking when he could play ball with her. Life was challenging but happy. Archibald worked hard. I took care of the children and the house. When Flora was 3, I took a job in the school cafeteria. We needed the extra money, and the job allowed me to be near the children and come home with them. Lloyd grew up to be a smart, inquisitive boy. He studied hard and dreamed of becoming an architect or engineer like his father. Flora was more creative nature, painted, sang in the school choir, participated in theater productions. When Lloyd turned 18, he went to college. Tuition was high, and Archibald and I decided to take on additional part-time jobs. I took a job as a janitor on the evening shift, and Archibald worked overtime. We rarely saw each other, but we were willing to do anything to give our son a good education. Flora also wanted to go to college, but by then, Archibald had already started to get sick. At first, it was just headaches, fatigue. Then the doctors found a brain tumor. Surgery, chemotherapy, all the money we'd been saving for Flora's tuition went to treatment. I remember her crying when she found out she wouldn't be able to go to her dream college. We found a cheaper option, a local community college, but it wasn't what she had dreamed of. I felt guilty, even though I realized that saving Archibald's life was more important. But all my efforts were in vain. Archibald was fading before my eyes. The last months were terrible. He hardly ever got out of bed. He didn't recognize us. He was often delirious. I didn't leave him a step away, changed his diapers, spoon-fed him, gave him medicine. Lloyd had already graduated from college and was working for a construction company in McAllen. He came rarely, always in a hurry to leave. Flora was around more often, but she couldn't stand the sight of her dying father either. The bus stopped, snapping me out of my memories. We arrived at the terminus, the outskirts of McAllen, a neighborhood where mostly workers and small employees lived. There were no luxury homes or manicured lawns, but the streets were clean and the houses were tidy. I got off the bus and looked around. The sign for the Dawn Motel was in front of the stop. The building was old but well kept, with neat curtains on the windows and pots of geraniums at the entrance. The decision came instantly. This place would be my temporary shelter until I decided what to do next. I crossed the road and entered the small lobby of the motel. There was a woman about my age sitting behind the front desk. She was full, with short gray hair and thick-rimmed glasses. When I walked in, she looked up from her book and smiled. "Good morning, can I help you?" "I need a room," I said, setting my suitcase on the floor. "Just for a few days until I find an apartment." The woman looked at me carefully. I imagined what I looked like. An old woman with one suitcase, no car, clearly confused. But there was no pity or suspicion in her eyes, only benevolent attention. "Of course we have rooms available. Do you want a view of the street or the courtyard? The courtyard is quieter." "Courtyard, please." "Excellent choice. How long do you plan to stay?" "I'm not sure yet. Maybe a week? Can I pay by the day?" "Sure," she nodded. $30 a night, including a simple breakfast. "My name is Ruth Kimball, and I own this motel." "Eudora Macy," I introduced myself. "Nice to meet you." Ruth smiled and handed me a registration card. "Fill it out, please. I'll get the keys ready." As I filled out the card, my mind raced with thoughts of money. I had a little cash, about $300. That would be enough for 10 days in a motel. The pension wouldn't come until 2 weeks later. What then? I'd have to find a job and a cheaper place to live. Here are your keys, room 23. Ruth handed me a set of 2 keys. Second floor, up the stairs to the right. If you need help with your suitcase, I can get Jorge. He's our janitor. Thanks, I'll be fine, I said, though my knees were aching. Suit yourself, Ruth shrugged. Breakfast is from 7 to 10, in the break room next to the lobby. If you have any questions or need help, feel free to ask. I thanked her and headed for the stairs. It was hard to climb, but I dragged my suitcase stubbornly step by step. I had to stop at the second floor landing to catch my breath. Room 23 was small but clean. A double bed with a white bedspread, a nightstand, a dresser, a small table by the window with 2 chairs, a television on the wall. The bathroom was tiny but had good water pressure and clean towels. I sat on the edge of the bed and looked around. It was so different from my room at Lloyd's house, that small but cozy room I'd spent 12 years setting up. There were no books, no photographs, no knitted plaids, just faceless hotel furnishings. Suddenly I was overcome with despair. What had I done? Where would I go? How will I live my life? Should I have swallowed my pride and stayed at Lloyd's, endured the neglect and ingratitude for a roof over my head? No. The decision has been made and there's no going back. I will not return to a place where I am considered a burden. I'd rather live in a cheap motel or even on the streets than see the contempt in the eyes of my own children. I unpacked my suitcase, hung my clothes neatly in my closet, put Archibald's picture on the nightstand. I wrapped the porcelain ballerina carefully in a towel and put it in the dresser drawer. There was no safe place for such a fragile object. Then I lay down on the bed and closed my eyes. The fatigue and tension of the last 24 hours took their toll, and I fell into a restless sleep. I woke to a knock at the door. It was getting dark outside the window. I'd been asleep all day. "Who's there?" I asked in a sleepy, hoarse voice. "It's Ruth, the receptionist. I just wanted to make sure you were all right. You haven't come down all day." I opened the door. Ruth was standing there with a tray in her hands. "I thought you might not want to come out for dinner, so I brought you a sandwich and tea. It's nothing fancy, but you won't be able to sleep on an empty stomach." I was touched by her concern. "Thank you, that's very kind of you. I really slept all day and didn't even think about food." "That's okay," she smiled. "Moving is always exhausting. May I come in?" I stepped aside to let her into the room. Ruth put the tray on the table by the window and sat down in one of the chairs. "I hope you don't mind company. I don't want to impose, but I thought you might like to talk." I sat down across from her. "I don't mind. Thank you for your concern." "You're welcome," she said with a wave of her hand. "I've been in a similar situation myself, so I know what it's like." "You too. Start your life over when you were my age?" I asked cautiously. "Not exactly your age, but close to it," Ruth nodded. "I was 57 when I divorced my husband after 30 years of marriage. He'd left me with a young coworker, leaving me with debts and a house that the bank soon took away. I was a school librarian. The pay was small. I had to start from scratch." "How did you cope?" "It was very hard at first." She sipped tea from her cup. "I lived in cheap motels and worked part-time. Then a former colleague told me that her aunt was selling the motel. The old lady couldn't run it anymore, and the kids lived far away and didn't want to take over the family business. The price was ridiculous, and I risked investing all my savings. In the first few years, I could barely make ends meet, but gradually things got better. Now I live here, in an apartment on the first floor, and I am quite happy with my life." Her story was inspiring. If Ruth could start again at 57, why couldn't I at 65? "What happened to you, if it's no secret?" Ruth asked. "You don't look like a homeless person or a tourist." I sighed. "My own kids kicked me out. They said I was a burden." Ruth shook her head. "That's how it is. Kids can be cruel, especially when they think their parents owe them something. I gave my whole life to them." The bitterness rose to my throat again. "Worked 2 jobs so they could go to college. I've spent the last 12 years living with my son and his family, taking care of the household, babysitting my grandchildren. And this is the thanks I get." "I understand," Ruth nodded sympathetically. My daughter doesn't take kindly to my visits either. She calls me at Christmas and Mother's Day, and that's it. She says I didn't support her enough during the divorce. What could I do when I was barely making ends meet? We talked late into the night. Ruth talked about her life, about her daughter Lauren, who lives in California and works as a designer, about her ex-husband, who had recently divorced his young wife and now lived alone, about her motel and her guests. I told her about Archibald, about Lloyd and Flora, about grandchildren I might never see again. Don't be silly, Ruth said sternly. Of course you will see your grandchildren. When the first shock has passed, your children will realize what they did was wrong and try to mend their relations. By then, you'll have settled down and will meet them on your own turf, from a position of strength, not as a petitioner. Her confidence gave me strength. For the first time in a long time, I felt that I was not alone, that there was someone who cared. Thank you, Ruth, I said as she left. You've been a great help to me today. You're welcome, she smiled. Come see me tomorrow after breakfast. I have a couple of ideas about jobs and housing. We can work something out together. When she left, I sat down on the bed again and looked at the picture of Archibald. Well, darling, I said aloud, I guess life is throwing me some surprises again. But I'll manage. I have a new friend, and that's a good start. Outside the window, the night city rumbled, and I sat in my small room in the cheap motel and felt something new stirring inside me. Not despair, not fear, but a strange, almost forgotten sense of hope. The morning of the third day at the Dawn Motel began with the sound of rain outside the window. I lay in bed, listening to the drops drumming on the windowsill, and pondered my situation. Ruth and I had looked at several apartments in the neighborhood yesterday, but they were all either too expensive or in terrible condition. My pension was barely enough to cover the most modest options, and those required a deposit, which I didn't have. I was interrupted by a knock at the door. Jadora, are you awake? It was Ruth's voice. I thought we could have breakfast together, and then I'll show you some more places. I opened the door. Ruth was standing there with 2 cups of coffee and a paper bag that smelled of fresh baked goods. I bought the buns from Nguyen, she said as she entered the room. He promised they were the freshest. Nguyen? I asked, taking my coffee. He has a corner store, groceries, lottery tickets, sundries. He's Vietnamese, lived here for 30 years. He's a good man, but he's a little weird. We ate breakfast, and Ruth suggested we walk to Nguyen's store to buy milk and bread. The day was sunny, as if yesterday's rain had washed away all the grayness and gloom. The streets were lively with people rushing to work and children going to school. It was a normal life in which I had to find my place. Nguyen's store was a small but very neat room filled with shelves of goods. Behind the counter stood an elderly Vietnamese man with kind eyes and gray hair in a neat ponytail. When he saw Ruth, he smiled. "Miss Kimball," he exclaimed. "I'm glad to see you. How are you?" "I'm fine, Mr. Nguyen," Ruth smiled. "I'd like you to meet my friend Eudora Macy. She's staying at my motel." Nguyen bowed politely. "Nice to meet you, Miss Macy. Welcome to my humble store." While Ruth picked out the groceries, I looked at the merchandise on the shelves. My eyes rested on a stand of lottery tickets. "Do you play the lottery, Miss Macy?" Nguyen asked, noticing my interest. "Never in my life," I shook my head. "My husband thought it was a waste of money." "I buy a ticket every week," Ruth said, coming up with a basket full of groceries. "I haven't won anything significant yet, but I'm hoping to be the last to die." Nguyen smiled. "Mrs. Parker won $200 last month, bought the ticket at my store. She says it brought her good luck. I don't know what got into me. Maybe I wanted to do something I'd never done before, or maybe just desperation." "Give me one ticket," I said, pulling $2 out of my wallet. "The luckiest one you have." Nguyen looked at me seriously, as if evaluating me, then nodded and turned to the ticket stand. He studied them for a long time, then chose one, a bright green one with a picture of a 4-leaf clover. "This one," he said, holding it out to me. "I woke up today thinking it would bring someone good luck." I took the ticket and tucked it into my purse, not really hoping for a win. It was just a little whim, a way to feel a part of a world where I once didn't allow myself such foolishness. That evening, back at the motel after another unsuccessful search for a job and a place to live, I found the ticket in my purse and remembered the evening's lottery drawing. Ruth was sitting in the lounge in front of a small television, and I joined her. "They're announcing the results now," she said, pointing to the screen. "Though the odds of winning anything substantial are about as good as a snowflake not melting in hell," the announcer announced. "And now the results of today's Texas lottery. The winning numbers are 21, 45, 9, 33, 70, and an additional number 11. I looked at my ticket and felt the ground go away from under my feet. Those were the numbers on the green paper. 21, 45, 9, 33, 70, 11. "Ruth," I whispered, "I think I've won." She snatched the ticket from me, checked the numbers, and shouted so loudly that all the guests in the room jumped. "Oh my God, Eudora won! She's won the jackpot!" The room was filled with shouts of surprise and congratulations. Someone patted me on the shoulder, someone shook my hand, and I stood there, unable to believe what was happening. "How much?" I finally squeezed out. "How much did I win?" Ruth looked at the screen again and gasped. $800,000. Eudora, you're rich. The next day was a blur. Ruth and I drove to the lottery office where I presented the winning ticket. The staff checked it, checked my documents, and congratulated me on my winnings. They explained to me the procedure of receiving the money. It would be transferred to my bank account after paying taxes, which would take about a week. On the way back, we stopped by the bank where I opened an account. The manager, having learned about the win, personally escorted me to the office and offered me tea while the documents were being drawn up. Such attention was unusual. Yesterday I was nothing, and today I suddenly became an important person. "You have to be careful," Ruth warned me as we left the bank. "News like this spreads fast. Soon everyone will know you've won the lottery." "Do you think that's a problem?" "Oh, it's a problem. Distant relatives you've never heard of, old friends you haven't seen in 20 years, they'll all be asking for money." She was right. By evening, the whole motel knew about my winnings, and by the next morning, the whole neighborhood. Mr. Nguyen proudly told all the customers that he was the one who picked my lucky ticket. The story made it into the local paper, and a reporter even came to interview me. And then the calls started coming in. Flora was the first to call. Her voice sounded unusually soft and ingratiating. "Mommy, I just found out! Congratulations, it's unbelievable!" "Thank you," I replied dryly. "How did you get my number?" "Lloyd gave it to me. He wants to talk to you too. We're all so happy for you." "Really? And a week ago you called me a burden and kicked me out of the house." There was silence on the other end of the line. Then Flora spoke in an apologetic tone. "Mom, we were wrong. You can't imagine how worried we've been all these days. We've been looking for you, but you didn't leave an address. I left a note saying I'd call you when I got settled, and I didn't. We were worried." There was a note of resentment in her voice. "You could have gotten into trouble and we didn't even know where to find you." "But now you found me," I said. "It's an amazing coincidence right after I won the lottery." "Mom, you're being unfair. We were really worried, and we want you to come home. Toby and Lizzie miss you." At the mention of grandchildren, my heart squeezed. I did miss them. But going back to a house where I was considered a burden? No, not again. "Tell them Grandma misses them too. But I'm not going back, Flora. I have a chance to live on my own now, and I'll take it." "But Mama, no, Flora. My decision is final," Lloyd called next. His tone was less ingratiating, but also unusually soft. "Mom, we need to talk. I'll come to you." "No need, Lloyd. I'm moving out of the motel." "Where? That's none of your business." "Mom, don't be like that. I know you're hurt, but we're family. We have to stick together." "Family?" I felt anger rising up inside of me. Family doesn't call each other a burden. A family doesn't kick an elderly mother out on the street. "We were wrong." He sounded annoyed. "How many times do we have to talk about this? We apologized. What more do you want?" "I want you to leave me alone, Lloyd. At least for now. I need time to think and decide what to do next." "You can't just walk around with that kind of money. You need advice. You need help." "I have friends who can help, and I'll find a financial advisor." "What financial advisor?" I could hear the anxiety in his voice. "Goodbye, Lloyd. I'll call you when I'm ready to talk." I hung up feeling strangely satisfied. For the first time in years, I was in control of the situation, not at the mercy of others. The next day, the calls continued. Flora called 3 times, Lloyd 5 times. Even Tanita called, which was completely unexpected. They all apologized, saying how much they missed me, how much they wanted me home. Don't give in, Ruth advised. They just want your money. I wasn't going to give in. Instead, I started looking for a new place to live. Not a cheap apartment, but a decent place where I could live comfortably. Ruth recommended the Madison Hotel, not the most luxurious in the city, but clean and with good service. I booked a room there for 2 weeks until I could find a permanent place to stay. You need a good financial advisor, Ruth said at our farewell dinner. I know one, Wesley Mort. He helped my friend after her divorce, and he's a very decent man. That's a good idea, I agreed. With that kind of money, it's easy to make a mistake. Here's his card. Tell him it's from me. Getting to the Hotel Madison was easier than I expected. The receptionist greeted me with a smile. The porter carried my modest suitcase to my room. The maid asked if I needed anything else. I felt like a princess from a fairy tale. The room was spacious and bright, with a large bed, soft carpet, TV, and luxury. A private bathroom with a jacuzzi. The window overlooked a small park. It was not at all like my room at Lloyd's or the modest room at the Dawn Motel. The first thing I did was to call Wesley Mort and make an appointment for the next day. Then I ordered room service dinner, another unfamiliar luxury, and settled into a chair by the window, watching the sun go down. The phone kept ringing. Flora, Lloyd, Flora again. I didn't answer it. I needed time to sort out my feelings and decide what to do next. In the morning, I met Wesley Mort in the hotel lobby. He was a short, full-bodied man in his 50s, with thinning hair and a good-natured face. He came in carrying a leather briefcase full of papers and prospectuses. Mrs. Macy, it's a pleasure to meet you. He shook my hand firmly. Ruth has told me a lot about you. We settled down in a cozy corner of the lobby where we could talk quietly. So, he began, pulling out a notebook. Let's talk about your financial situation and goals. What do you want to do with your winnings? I wondered. To be honest, I didn't have a clear plan. I want to buy a house, small but cozy with a garden, and I want to have a peaceful old age, so I don't have to depend on my children. That's a good plan. Wesley nodded approvingly. Let's see how we can accomplish that. He spent the next 2 hours talking to me about investment options, taxes, retirement plans, and insurance. I tried to absorb all the details, but my head was spinning with new terms and concepts. Don't worry, Wesley reassured me, noticing my confusion. We won't make any decisions today. I'll prepare some investment plans for you, and you'll study them carefully. We'll meet in a couple of days and discuss the details. When I woke up in my room at the Madison Hotel, I lay awake for a long time, enjoying the unusual silence. No one demanded to prepare breakfast. No one criticized my actions. No one treated me like a servant. This freedom was intoxicating and a little frightening. I had lived for others for so long that I had almost forgotten what it was like to live for myself. At breakfast in the hotel restaurant, I looked through the newspaper with real estate listings. Now that I had money, I could afford a house of my own. Not a luxurious mansion, no. Just a cozy place where I could spend the rest of my life in peace and dignity. My peaceful morning was disturbed by the ringing of my cell phone, a recent acquisition that Ruth had insisted I buy for safety. Flora's name popped up on the screen. Good morning, Mom. Her voice sounded strained. How are you? Fine, Flora. What do you need? Need? She tried to feign offense. Can't I just call and see how my mom's doing? I sighed. Flora, you've called me 28 times in the last 2 days. Before that, not once in 2 weeks. So yes, you need something. Pause. Then, okay, Mom, I really wanted to talk to you about money. That's what I was thinking. Not about what you thought. I'm not asking for money for myself. I'm worried you might be cheated. You're not used to handling that kind of money. I have a financial advisor. Yes, you did, some Wesley Mort. She said the name with obvious disdain. Who is he? Did you check his license? Recommendations? Ruth recommended him. He helped a friend of hers through a divorce. Ruth, 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 Flora exclaimed irritably. Who is this Ruth? You've known her less than a week. And us, your family, your whole life. I felt my irritation rising. The family that threw me out of the house and called me a burden. Mom, we can't talk about this anymore. We've already apologized. People make mistakes, say things they don't mean. I think you meant exactly what you said. You just didn't expect me to actually leave, much less win the lottery. Flora took a deep breath, clearly trying to hold back her irritation. Look, Mom, Lloyd and I want to come to you to talk to you in person. Could you let me know what hotel you're staying at? No, Flora, I don't want to see you, at least not yet. But Mommy, her voice broke. I'll bring Pearl. She misses her grandmother so much. Ah, so that's it. Now they're trying to manipulate me through my grandchildren. I felt anger rising up inside me. Flora, be honest, does Pearl really miss me, or are you just using her to get at my money? How can you say that? Her daughter was indignant. Of course she misses you. She loves you. Then why hasn't she come to visit me once in the last year? Not even at Christmas. Silence. Then silence. You're not being fair, Mother. No, Flora. It's you who's unfair. You only remembered me when you found out about the winnings. And now you're trying to manipulate my feelings through my grandchildren. That's low. I ended the call and turned my phone off. My hands were trembling slightly. Despite my resolve, it hurt to say these things to my own daughter. But it hurt even more to realize they were true. After breakfast, I met with the realtor Wesley had recommended. Marjorie Tanner was an energetic woman in her 50s, with short gray hair and a shrewd eye. So, Mrs. Macy, what are you looking for? She asked as we got into her car. A small house, I answered, with a garden, in a quiet neighborhood. Nothing fancy, but cozy. Budget? Up to $300,000. She raised her eyebrows in surprise. With your means, you could afford something more impressive. I don't want to be impressive, I smiled. I want to live comfortably. And the rest of the money is better invested, as Wesley suggests. Marjorie nodded understandingly. That makes sense. I have a few options that might work for you. Over the course of the day, we looked at 5 houses. I didn't like the first 4. One was too big, one was in a noisy neighborhood, one was in need of serious repairs, and one was too close to Lloyd's house, which was unacceptable. The 5th house was exactly what I was looking for. It was a small one-story ranch-style cottage with 2 bedrooms, a spacious living room, a bright kitchen, and most importantly, a lovely garden. The previous owners were clearly gardening enthusiasts. Roses, hydrangeas, and lilies bloomed around the house. There was an old apple tree at the back of the garden and a small pond with lilies in the corner. It's perfect, I said, looking around the garden. How much are they asking? $280,000, said Marjorie. But I think we can bargain a little. No, I shook my head. If the house is in good condition, I'm willing to pay full price. When we got back to the hotel, I felt pleasantly excited. For the first time in a long time, I had a goal, something I really wanted for myself. I called Ruth to share the news. That's wonderful, Eudora, she exclaimed. When can I see it? Come tomorrow. Marjorie will take us there again, and if everything is all right, I'll sign the papers. I'll be there, and I'll bring Helen Dawson with me. She's the president of our local garden club. I'm sure she'll like you. We made an appointment, and I hung up the phone with a smile. The thought of my own home and new friends filled me with joy. Maybe everything that had happened, leaving my son's house, living in a motel, winning the lottery, was for the best. My musings were interrupted by a knock on the door. That's odd. I wasn't expecting anyone, and I'd ordered room service for later in the day. Who is it? I asked. The maid, ma'am. I need to change the towels. Something in that voice sounded familiar. I opened the door cautiously and froze. Lloyd and Flora were standing in front of me. Hi, Mom. Flora smiled nervously. I'm sorry for the deception, but you left us no choice. How did you find me? I didn't try to hide my irritation. We called every decent hotel in town. Lloyd shrugged. It wasn't hard. What do you want? To talk. Flora tried to take my hand, but I pulled away. Please, Mom, just 5 minutes. I hesitated. On the one hand, I didn't want to deal with them. On the other hand, I'd rather settle this now than endure constant calls and visits. 5 minutes, I stepped back, letting them into the room. Lloyd looked around with the look of an appraiser. Nice place. How much is a room like this a night? That's none of your business, Lloyd. He held up his hands in a conciliatory gesture. All right, all right. I'm just worried you're spending money too fast. My money, my spending. Mom, Flora intervened, sitting down on the edge of the bed. We're really worried about you. You've never dealt with such sums of money. You could be cheated. And that's why you lied to the maid to get into my room? They looked at each other, clearly not expecting such a rebuff. We want to help, Lloyd finally said. I can take a look at your contract with that, financial advisor. See if he's cheating you. Thanks, but Wesley Mort is a respected professional with excellent references, and he doesn't charge me any upfront fees if that's what you're worried about. What about the commission? Lloyd wouldn't budge. It might be hidden in the terms of the contract. I can read, Lloyd. And Ruth checked all the documents before I signed them. Ruth, 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 Flora exclaimed. Who is this Ruth that you trust her so much? My friend, I answered firmly. A person who helped me when I was in a bad way, unlike you. There was another awkward silence. Then Lloyd changed tactics. Mom, we brought Toby and Lizzie. They're waiting in the car. They miss you so much. My heart squeezed. I really did miss my grandchildren, but to use them as leverage? That was low, even for them. Bring them in, I said. I'd be glad to see them. Flora went out and returned a minute later with the children. Toby, an 8-year-old with wavy hair, and Lizzie, a 6-year-old girl with pigtails, came rushing toward me with shouts of joy. Grandma, we missed you. I hugged them, feeling tears come to my eyes. How much I love those babies. I missed you too, my good ones. How are you doing? What's new at school? The children began to tell me about their successes and adventures. I listened to them, smiling, but out of the corner of my eye, I noticed Lloyd and Flora exchanging meaningful glances. They were obviously counting on seeing their grandchildren to soften me. When the children finished their stories, Lloyd said casually, See, Mama, how they miss me. They miss their grandmother at home. I miss them too, I said. And I'd love it if you'd bring them to visit me. I'm buying a house with a garden. They'll love it. A house? Lloyd asked. You're buying a house already? Without consulting us? Why should I consult you? Because we're your family, Flora exclaimed. Because we care about you. Care? I looked at her in disbelief. When was the last time you cared about me instead of what I can do for you? It's not fair, Mom. Lloyd blushed with anger. We gave you a roof over your head when your father died. You lived with us for 12 years. Yes, I did. As a housekeeper and a nanny. Have you ever asked me what I want? What I'm interested in? What I dream of? No. I was a tool for you, nothing more. The children looked at us wide-eyed, not understanding why the adults were fighting. Lloyd, Flora, you'd better leave, I said quietly. The children don't need to hear this. No, Mom. Lloyd crossed his arms over his chest with determination. We're not leaving until we resolve the issue of your money. There's nothing to resolve. It's my money, and I'll handle it as I see fit. You're out of your mind, he suddenly lashed out. You're under the influence of some criminals who want your money. Lloyd, Flora shouted at him, nodding at the children. No, let the children hear. He was furious. Let them know that their grandmother is out of her mind and is going to squander all the money instead of helping the family. I felt a cold calmness fill me. Out of her mind? That's an interesting theory. And when did that happen? Before or after I won the lottery? You know what I mean? He raised his voice. You met some Ruth in a cheap motel, and suddenly she's your best friend and counselor. She's obviously manipulating you. Ruth helped me when I had nowhere else to go. She gave me a roof over my head and support when my own family kicked me out. We didn't kick you out, Flora objected. We just offered to live apart. After you called me a burden, I reminded her. Now please leave, all of you. We're not leaving, Lloyd said stubbornly. Not until you come to your senses. I went to the phone. Then I'll call security. You wouldn't dare, he took a step toward me, but I was already dialing. Administrator? This is Eudora Macy in room 312. I have uninvited guests who refuse to leave. Could you please send security? Lloyd's face contorted with anger. You're going to regret this, Mom. I'll sue you. I'll prove that you're insane and can't handle your own money. Try it, I said calmly. Any psychiatrist will confirm that I'm sane. Your obsession with my money, on the other hand, doesn't seem very normal. Come on, Lloyd. Flora tugged on my brother's sleeve. The children are upset. Indeed, Toby and Lizzie looked at us with frightened eyes. I felt ashamed that they had witnessed this ugly scene. I'm sorry, my good ones. I hugged my grandchildren. Grandma and your parents had a little fight. It happens to adults. Come on, children, Lloyd said sharply. We have to go. They left just before the guard showed up. I apologized for disturbing them and explained that the problem was already solved. Left alone, I felt my strength leaving me. This confrontation was exhausting my soul. Despite all their ingratitude, these were my children. I loved them, and it pained me to see what they had become. In the evening, Flora called. Her voice sounded depressed. Mom, I'm sorry about tonight. Lloyd overreacted. Yes, he did, I agreed. Threatening to sue his own mother is too much. He's just worried. We're both worried. And we're hurt that you trust some strangers more than you trust us. Flora, these strangers have treated me with more respect and care than you have in years. They don't consider me a burden. They don't demand anything from me in return. Not yet, she said, the usual sarcastic tone in her voice. We'll see what happens when they realize they're not getting anything more from you. You know what the saddest part is, Flora? That you measure every relationship by profit. You don't understand that someone can be just a friend, just a helper, without expecting anything in return. That's naive, Mother. No, Flora, it's human. And I'm sorry you don't understand that. I ended the conversation feeling a mixture of sadness and determination. I won't give up. I'm not going back to my old life. I won't let them manipulate me and take away my chance at happiness. The next day was devoted to buying a house. Marjorie prepared all the paperwork, and Ruth and I and her friend Helen Dawson, a personable lady with gray hair and a neat bundle, took another look at the house. Excellent choice, Eudora, Helen said, looking at the rose bushes. The previous owners had clearly been experts. These rose varieties aren't easy to grow in our climate. I don't know much about gardening, I admitted, but I've always wanted to learn. I'll teach you, she smiled. And you should join our garden club. We meet once a week, exchange experiences, and sometimes organize excursions to botanical gardens. You'd love it. The thought of having a new hobby and new friends filled me with joy. After signing the papers, Marjorie handed me the keys. Congratulations, Mrs. Macy. The house is officially yours. I clutched the cool metal in my palm, tears welling up in my eyes. My house. For the first time in my life, I had a house that belonged only to me. That's something to celebrate, Ruth exclaimed. I suggest we have lunch at the Green Olive, the best restaurant in town. Over lunch, we discussed plans for the house. Helen gave advice on gardening, Ruth suggested furniture and decorations, and I listened to them, feeling a growing excitement. For the first time in a long time, I felt truly alive. The next day, I moved into my new home. It was empty. The previous owners had taken all the furniture, leaving only the curtains and chandeliers, but even so, the house seemed beautiful to me. The bright rooms, the large windows overlooking the garden, the old fireplace in the living room, it was all mine, only mine. Ruth helped me make a list of the furniture and furnishings I needed. Don't rush into buying, she advised. Live here for a while, get a feel for the space. You'll see exactly what you need. Helen brought me a few pots of potted plants, just to make the house feel cozy. And this weekend, come to our club meeting. You'll get to know everyone. In the evening, after Ruth and Helen left, I sat on the porch of my new house, watching the sun go down. The garden was bathed in golden light, the roses were fragrant, and somewhere in the distance birds were singing. I felt wonderfully calm and peaceful. My phone rang. I glanced at the screen, Lloyd. I decided not to answer it. Let the whole world wait. This moment was mine alone. It had been a month since I'd moved into my new home. A lot had changed in that time. I'd bought furniture, simple but comfortable, and I decorated the walls with pictures of landscapes that reminded me of the places I'd been with Archibald. The garden began to take on a new look as Helen helped me trim the rose bushes and plant new flowers. The calls from Lloyd and Flora didn't stop. At first they called every day, then every 2 or 3 days. Sometimes I answered, sometimes I didn't. Our conversations became more and more tense. They begged me to come back, threatened to sue, or offered to help me manage my money. I remained adamant. Finally, after another unpleasant call, I decided it was time to put an end to the relationship. I invited them to a meeting at a neutral place, the Green Olive Restaurant, where Ruth, Helen, and I were celebrating the purchase of the house. On the appointed day, I arrived early and chose a table in the corner of the room where I had a clear view of the entire restaurant. I was dressed in a new ivory suit that I had bought especially for the occasion. My hair was styled, and I had a light lipstick on my lips. I wanted to look confident and dignified. Flora was the first to arrive. She looked nervous, fidgeting with the strap of her purse and fixing her hair. "Mom," she kissed me awkwardly on the cheek. "You look beautiful." "Thank you, Flora. You look good too." We sat down at the table and there was an awkward silence. Finally, she asked, "How are you getting along in your new home? Is it good?" "Yes, it's great. I'm very happy with my choice." That's good." She started fiddling with her purse strap again. "Mom, She was interrupted by Lloyd. He entered the restaurant with a tense face, looked around, and noticing us, headed for a table. "Mom, Flora," he nodded dryly, sitting down next to his sister. "Am I late?" "No, we're just getting started," I replied. "Let's order first, and then we'll talk." We ordered lunch. I chose salmon with vegetables, Flora a salad, and Lloyd a steak. While we waited for our order, the conversation revolved around the weather, mutual acquaintances, city news, not a word about money, about my move, about our conflict. It seemed the three of us had decided to postpone unpleasant conversation until the last moment. When the food arrived, Lloyd couldn't take it anymore. "Mom, let's cut to the chase. You didn't invite us over for small talk." I put down my fork and blotted my lips with my napkin. "You're right, Lloyd. I invited you here to clear the air once and for all." I pulled a folder of documents out of my purse and put it on the table. "Here are the documents I want you to see. These are copies. The originals are with my lawyer." "Lawyer?" Flora asked. "You have an attorney?" "Yes, Wesley Mort recommended a good one. His name is Simon Pettigrew. He helped me sort out the legal issues related to my winnings and inheritance." Lloyd frowned. "What inheritance?" "My inheritance." I opened the folder and pulled out the first document. It's a will. I made it last week. According to it, most of my money will go into a special fund for Toby, Lizzie, and Pearl when I die. The money will be paid to them in installments, starting at age 21, and only for their education and the purchase of their first home. "Have you made a will?" Flora looked shocked. "But you're not going to die," I smiled. "No, not anytime soon, but I'm 65 and I'd rather have everything in order." I pulled out a second document. And this is even more interesting. It's an agreement to set up an educational fund for the grandchildren. I've already transferred $500,000 to it. The money will only be available to them after the age of 21 and only for educational purposes. Until then, neither you nor they will be able to use these funds. Lloyd turned pale. $500,000? But that's a big chunk of your winnings. Yes, I nodded. I think the children's education is the best investment, and I've left myself enough for a comfortable life. "But Mother," Flora looked at me puzzled, "why do it now? You could help us. I have a house loan. Lloyd has business problems." "That's exactly why I did it now," I said firmly. "So that the money doesn't go to your debts and problems, but actually helps the kids get a good education." "You don't trust us," Lloyd said, not as a question, but as a statement. "No, I don't." I looked him straight in the eye. "You kicked me out of the house, calling me a burden. And then when you heard about the winnings, you suddenly remembered that I was your mother. How can I trust you?" Flora began to cry. "Mom, we apologized. We were wrong. People make mistakes." "Yes, people make mistakes," I agreed. "And I was wrong too. I thought that if I cared enough about you, if I gave you everything, my time, my energy, my love, you would appreciate it. But I was wrong. You took my care for granted, and when I got older and weaker, when I became less useful, you decided to get rid of me." "I did not," Lloyd exclaimed. "We just wanted you to live on your own." "After 12 years of living together? After I'd given you almost my entire pension? After I raised your children while you built your career? No, Lloyd, you just decided you didn't need me anymore." He lowered his eyes. Flora continued to cry. I don't blame you, I continued. I let it happen. I didn't teach you to appreciate what you have. I always put your needs before my own, and as a result you have grown selfish and callous. It's my fault, and I have to live with it. Mom, Flora took my hand. Give us another chance. We can make things right. Come back to us. Or let us move in with you. We'll be a family. I released my hand gently. No, Flora. That's not going to happen. I'm not coming back to you, and you're not moving in with me. I have my own life now, my own friends, my own interests. I'm finally living for myself, and it's a wonderful feeling. But the children? Lloyd began. I'd love to see my grandchildren, I interrupted him. You can bring them to visit me, but I don't want to see you. At least not yet. For now? Flora's eyes flashed with hope. Yes, for now. Maybe in time I'll be able to forgive you. But right now the wound is too fresh. Lloyd looked at me with rage. You can't just cut us out of your life. We're your children. I'm not cutting you out, Lloyd. I'm just setting boundaries. I will no longer live for you. I will not tolerate your neglect. I will not be your free nanny and housekeeper. If you want to be a part of my life, you're going to have to respect me and my decisions. He stood up, tossing his napkin on the table. Come on, Flora. There's nothing for us to do here. Flora hesitated, looking at me and at her brother. Flora, I said softly, you're a grown woman. You can make your own decisions. Don't let Lloyd speak for you. She sighed. Mom, I don't know what to say. I'm sorry about everything. I really am. Me too, I replied sincerely. But sometimes you have to lose something to realize its value. Maybe that's a lesson for all of us. She nodded, getting up. I'll call you. About the kids. When you can bring them over. I'll be waiting, I smiled. Say hi to Pearl. They left, and I sat at the table, finishing my tea. A strange feeling of emptiness and release came over me at the same time. I had done what I should have done a long time ago, asserted my right to my own life. The next few months flew by. I became fully immersed in setting up the house and garden. Helen became my gardening mentor. Every morning, I would wake up at sunrise and go to the garden, pruning roses, weeding beds, watering young seedlings. It was meditative, calming work that brought me great pleasure. I regularly attended garden club meetings where I met many interesting people. Among them was Leroy Piper, a 73-year-old widower, former biology teacher, and passionate gardener. He lived 2 streets away from me and offered to drive me to club meetings. Leroy was the complete opposite of Archibald, calm, reasonable, with a subtle sense of humor. He didn't try to impress me, didn't try to appear younger or richer than he really was. He was easy and comfortable to be with. One day after a club meeting, he invited me for a cup of tea in his garden. He had an amazing Japanese garden with a pond, a bridge, and a bamboo gazebo. It's beautiful, I said, looking at the neatly trimmed bushes and the stones arranged in a special order. How long did it take you to create a garden like this? 20 years, he smiled. I started after my wife died. It was a kind of therapy. I'm sorry, I touched his hand. It must have been hard. Yeah, he nodded. Elizabeth and I lived together for 40 years. When she died, I thought I would never get over it. But time heals, you know. And the garden helped. Working with plants teaches patience and acceptance. There's a time for everything to grow, to bloom, to wither. We talked late into the evening. Leroy talked about his life, his schoolwork, the traveling he and his wife had done before her illness. I talked about Archibald, about the children, about my work in the school cafeteria. What do you do now besides gardening? He asked. Nothing much so far, I admitted. I'm organizing the house, learning to live on my own. But I'm thinking about traveling. Archibald and I have always wanted to see the world, but first we didn't have money, then we didn't have time, then he got sick. So why not fulfill that dream now? Leroy suggested it. You're young, you're strong, you have the means. What are you waiting for? His words made me think, what am I waiting for? All my life I had put my dreams on hold, prioritizing the needs of others. But now I was free, no obligations, no need to sacrifice myself for anyone. The next day I went to a travel agency and bought a ticket for a Mediterranean cruise. A 2-week trip to Italy, Greece, Spain, all the places Archibald and I had once dreamed of. When I told Ruth and Helen about my plans, they were delighted. "It's a wonderful idea," Ruth exclaimed. "You need to see the world to have new experiences." "I'll take care of your garden while you're away," Helen promised. "You don't have to worry." Leroy also approved of my decision. "It will be an unforgettable trip. I've been to Greece in the 90s. It's an amazing country. Bring me back some olive oil from Crete if you're there." Before I left, I received an unexpected call from Flora. "Mom, I heard you're going on a cruise?" "Yes," I replied, surprised that she knew of my plans. "In 3 days. That's that's great. I'm happy for you. Listen, I was wondering, maybe Pearl could come visit you before you leave. She misses you." I hesitated. On the one hand, I really missed my granddaughter. On the other, I didn't want Flora to use the baby as a way to manipulate her. "All right," I said at last. "Bring her back tomorrow afternoon. But only her, Flora. I'm not ready to see you." "I understand." Her voice sounded humble. "I'll just bring her in and pick her up tonight. Thank you, Mother." The next day, Pearl arrived in a cab. Flora honored my request and didn't show up herself. My 13-year-old granddaughter looked almost a grown-up girl, tall, with long red hair in a ponytail and a scattering of freckles on her nose. "Grandma!" She hugged me with genuine joy. "I missed you so much." "I missed you too, dear," I hugged her back. "Come in, I made your favorite blueberry muffins." We spent a wonderful afternoon together. I showed her the house and garden and told her about my travel plans. She told me about school, about her friends, about her new hobby of photography. "Mommy says you've set up a special education fund for us," she said, as we sat in the garden drinking tea and muffins. "Is that true?" "Yes," I nodded. "I want you, Toby, and Lizzie to have every opportunity to get a good education." "Thank you, Grandma." She looked at me seriously. "I want to be a photographer, or maybe a journalist. Anyway, I haven't made up my mind yet, but I know I want to study." "That's great, Pearl. It's all about finding something you really like, something that makes your heart race." "How's your garden?" She smiled. "Yes, like my garden." I laughed. "And like your picture." When it was time to say goodbye, she hugged me tightly. "I will miss you, Grandma. Promise to bring me something from your trip." "I promise." I kissed her forehead. "And I promise that when I come back, we'll see each other more often." My trip turned out to be even better than I could have dreamed. Every day was filled with new impressions. The ancient ruins of Athens, the azure waters of Santorini, the narrow streets of Barcelona, the majestic Colosseum in Rome. I photographed everything I saw to show my grandchildren and friends. On the ship, I met several interesting people. A retired couple from Canada, a widow from Australia, a teacher from England. We had dinner together, went on excursions, shared stories of our lives. None of them had known me before, had no preconceptions. To them, I was just Eudora, an interesting woman with a sense of humor and a love of gardening. When I returned home, I felt refreshed, full of energy and plans. I enrolled in an art class, another longtime hobby that I had abandoned after I got married. It turned out that I was pretty good at watercolor, especially flowers and seascapes. Leroy became a frequent visitor to my house. We worked together in the garden, went to concerts in the local park, sometimes just sat on the veranda and talked about everything. There was no romantic relationship between us, just a warm friendship between two lonely people who found in each other a kindred spirit. Flora periodically brought the children Pearl and sometimes Toby and Lizzie, whom Lloyd let go. She was always polite, but kept her distance, respecting my desire not to reestablish close relations. Lloyd didn't call or write. Apparently his pride was too wounded. A year passed. I made 2 more trips, to Japan in the spring to see the cherry blossoms, and to England in the summer to visit the famous gardens I had read so much about. My own garden blossomed and became a source of pride. Garden club members even held a retreat and tea party in it. I started blogging about gardening and traveling, nothing serious. Just notes about what I saw and learned, photos of flowers and interesting places. To my surprise, the blog got readers, mostly people my age who, like me, decided to start a new life in their old age. One warm autumn afternoon, I was sitting in my garden, painting a newly bloomed rose with watercolors. Leroy was supposed to come over later. We planned to have dinner together and watch an old movie we both loved. My phone beeped, announcing a new message. I glanced at the screen. Lloyd. Mom, we need to talk. It's important. Please call me back. I looked at the message, then at the rose I was drawing, at the golden leaves swirling in the air, at the clear blue sky overhead. Life was beautiful in its simplicity and complexity. I finally had a life of my own, the kind of life I had always dreamed of. I deleted the message without reading further and went back to my watercolor.